The air in Maple Creek, Illinois, hung thick and heavy in the last weeks of August, a damp blanket that clung to the skin and muted the cheerful chirp of the cicadas. For Olivia Whelan, it was the kind of weather that made the cool, conditioned air of her restored Victorian home feel less like a comfort and more like a necessary seal against the world. The house, with its polished oak floors and meticulously chosen antiques, was her masterpiece, a physical manifestation of the 15 years she and Michael had spent building a life. As an architect, Olivia understood structure. She believed in blueprints, in foundations, in the careful, deliberate process of creating something strong and beautiful. Her marriage, she had always thought, was the strongest structure of all. Lately, however, she'd begun to notice hairline cracks, not in the plaster of her lovingly restored walls, but in the very atmosphere of her home. They were almost imperceptible, the kind of flaws only the architect would see. It was in the way Michael, her husband of 15 years, now held his phone, angled slightly away from her, its screen a dark, reflective secret. It was in the new, hollow spaces in their conversations, silences that were once filled with comfortable intimacy, now stretched into awkward voids. Michael, a high school English teacher, beloved for his gentle demeanor and passion for the classics, had become a ghost in his own life. He was present, yet absent. He would sit across from her at the dinner table, their State of the Union, as he used to call it, and his eyes would have a faraway look, as if he were reading a page from a book only he could see. He developed a new habit of taking long, aimless drives after dinner. "Just need to clear my head," he'd say, the excuse as worn and thin as the pages of his favorite copy of The Great Gatsby. Olivia tried to rationalize it. He was 40 now. Maybe it was a midlife crisis, a quiet rebellion against the comfortable predictability of their suburban existence. Maple Creek, for all its charm, could feel like a gilded cage, with its pristine lawns and unspoken social codes. The pressure to maintain the image of the perfect family, the successful architect wife, the respected teacher husband, the beautiful historic home, was immense. But this felt different. It wasn't the cliché of a man yearning for a sports car or a younger woman. It was a deeper, more profound sorrow that seemed to emanate from him, a melancholy that even his driest jokes couldn't conceal. There was also, paradoxically, a new lightness to him at times, a flicker of something she couldn't name that would appear when a text message lit up his phone. It was a private joy, one she was not privy to, and that, more than anything, felt like a betrayal. Tonight, the humidity was at its peak. A low-grade thunderstorm rumbled in the distance, the air so charged it felt like the world was holding its breath. Michael was out on another of his drives. Olivia sat in their shared home office, ostensibly looking for a PDF of a zoning permit for a new project. The office, like the rest of the house, was a testament to their partnership. 2 desks faced each other, his cluttered with books and student papers, hers a neat landscape of rulers, blueprints, and drafting pencils. Her search on the shared desktop was fruitless. On a whim, driven by a gnawing anxiety she could no longer suppress, she clicked on a folder she'd never noticed before. It was innocuously labeled Drafts. Her heart gave a painful thud, a premonition. She expected to find half-finished lesson plans or recommendation letters. Instead, she found a series of Word documents. The file names were just dates, stretching back 3 months. With a trembling hand, she opened the most recent one. It wasn't a lesson plan. It was a letter, an unsent letter addressed to E. E. It happened again today. We were in the faculty lounge, and you were talking about that new exhibit at the Art Institute, the one with the Rothko paintings. Your whole face lit up, and for a second, I forgot where we were. I forgot the fluorescent lights, the smell of stale coffee, the entire carefully constructed life I've built around myself. All I saw was you, and all I felt was this this devastating sense of recognition. It's like looking in a mirror and seeing the person I was supposed to be. I went home and Olivia had made that lasagna I love. She asked about my day. I told her it was fine. The word felt like swallowing sand. Fine. My life is fine. It's a good life. She is a good person. The best. And that is the cruelest part of all. Every kindness from her feels like a turn of the screw. Every time she touches my arm, my skin feels like a lie. I don't know how to do this. I've spent 20 years becoming an expert in suppression. It's a language I am fluent in. But since you arrived, I've started to forget the words. You speak in a language of truth, and it is undoing me. M. Olivia's breath caught in her chest. It felt as if the air had been vacuumed from the room. She clicked open another file, and another. Each one was a variation on the same theme, a raw, poetic anguish. The letter spoke of shared lunches, of conversations about poetry and art, of a man named Ethan, E., the new art teacher at Michael's school. They spoke of a connection so profound it was making Michael's life unbearable. They spoke of his fear, his guilt, and a desperate, suffocating loneliness he had carried for decades. There was no mention of a physical affair, no sordid details. There was something infinitely worse. There was the truth that the man she had loved for half her life was in love with someone else. And more than that, the truth that the entire premise of their life together, the very blueprint she had built her world upon, was based on a foundation of profound and painful deception. The distant thunder finally broke overhead, a deafening crack that seemed to split the night in two. The rain began to fall, not a gentle shower, but a violent, torrential downpour, lashing against the windows of the perfect house. Olivia didn't move. She just sat there, staring at the glowing screen, as the carefully constructed walls of her life dissolved around her. The sound of the front door opening an hour later was a gunshot in the silent house. Olivia hadn't moved from the office chair. The rain had settled into a steady, mournful rhythm against the glass. She heard Michael's footsteps, the soft thud of his wet shoes on the welcome mat, the jingle of his keys as he placed them in the ceramic bowl on the hall table, a ritual so familiar it now seemed like a scene from a stranger's life. "Liv?" he called out, his voice tentative. "You still up?" She didn't answer. She heard him move through the downstairs rooms, a soft query in each footstep. When he appeared in the office doorway, his hair was damp, his face etched with a weary confusion. He saw her sitting in the dark, illuminated only by the glow of the monitor. His eyes followed hers to the screen. The color drained from his face. He didn't need to read the words. He knew what they were. The carefully maintained dam of his life had just burst. "Olivia," he whispered. The word was a wisp of smoke, carrying the weight of 1,000 apologies he didn't know how to begin to voice. She finally turned her head to look at him. Her face was a mask of placid shock. There were no tears. Her emotional system had short-circuited, leaving only a terrifying Arctic calm. "Who is E?" she asked. Her voice was flat, devoid of inflection. It was the voice of an architect assessing structural failure. Michael leaned against the doorframe, as if his legs could no longer support him. "His name is Ethan," he said, his voice cracking. He's a teacher at school, and you love him." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, a conclusion drawn from the evidence presented. He flinched, a full-body recoil from the simple, brutal truth of her words. He couldn't speak. He just stared at her, his eyes pleading, terrified, and for the first time in 15 years, utterly transparent. In them, she saw it all: the guilt, the fear, the shame, and something else, a flicker of desperate, heartbreaking relief. "All this time," Olivia said, her voice still unlearningly steady as she swiveled in the chair to face him fully, "our life, this house, our friends, our vows," she listed them like items on a punch list, components of a project that had been condemned. Was any of it real? Yes, he choked out, the word raw and desperate. Yes, Liv, it was. All of it. My love for you, it's real. It's just, he trailed off, his hands gesturing helplessly, trying to articulate a reality so complex and contradictory that it had broken him. Complicated, she repeated. The word was an insult. A skyscraper collapsing is not complicated. It is a catastrophe. You built a life with me as a shield. You used my love, my trust, as a place to hide. Her calm was beginning to fracture, the first tremors of a seismic rage vibrating beneath the surface. You stood there, at our wedding, in front of everyone we love, and you lied. You've been lying every single day for 15 years. I didn't know how not to, he stammered, tears now streaming freely down his face. He looked pathetic, a boy caught in a transgression far beyond his ability to manage. I was so scared. I've been scared my whole life. I thought if I built a good life, a right life with you, that it would fix me, that the other part of me would just go away. The confession hung in the air between them, thick and poisonous. The other part of me. It was the part that loved Ethan, the part that was not, and had never been, attracted to her. The women. The implications settled into Olivia's bones with the chilling weight of a final, irreversible truth. This wasn't just an affair. This was an invalidation of her entire identity as his wife, his partner, his lover. She stood up slowly, her body stiff. The house, her sanctuary, suddenly felt like a stage set. The antique furniture, the framed photos of their smiling faces on the mantelpiece, the worn armchair where he read to her. It was all a collection of props for a play in which she was the only one who hadn't known her lines were fiction. "I need you to leave," she said, her voice now dangerously quiet. "Liv, please," he begged, taking a step toward her. "We can talk about this. We can—" "There is nothing to talk about right now," she cut him off, her tone sharp as broken glass. "You have been talking to Ethan. Your real conversations have been with him. With me, you have only been performing. The performance is over. Get out." He stared at her, his face a ruin of grief and self-loathing. He saw the finality in her eyes. He had spent a lifetime hiding, and now, with the truth finally exposed, he was being cast out. He gave a single, ragged nod, turned, and walked out of the room. Olivia listened to his footsteps retreat, the click of the front door, the sound of his car starting and fading into the rain-soaked night. She stood alone in the office, the silence roaring in her ears. She looked at the letters on the screen, a digital testament to her life's great lie. Then the Arctic calm finally shattered. A sob tore from her throat, a raw, animal sound of such profound agony that it seemed to shake the very foundations of the house. She sank to the floor, her architect's mind, which craved order and logic, overwhelmed by the chaos of a world that no longer made any sense. The blueprint was in ashes. The days that followed were a blur of muted color and distorted sound. Olivia moved through her life like a somnambulist, performing the functions of a living person without any of the feeling. She went to work, reviewed blueprints, spoke to contractors. Her professionalism was a shield, a familiar structure she could hide behind, while the edifice of her personal life lay in rubble. The house became her tormentor. Every object was a memory, and every memory was now tainted. The wedding photo on the nightstand was a portrait of a liar and a fool. The coffee mug he used every morning, left by the sink, was a relic of a shared ritual that was hollow. She began to see the house not as a home, but a crime scene, and she was the forensic expert examining the evidence of her own undoing. Michael had retreated to a cheap motel on the edge of town. His texts were a pathetic trickle of despair. "I'm so sorry. Please let me know you're okay. I'll do anything." Olivia read them with a detached coldness and deleted them without replying. The thought of his pain brought her no satisfaction, only a vast, empty exhaustion. Her best friend, Chloe, drove in from Chicago the weekend after it happened. She found Olivia sitting on her porch swing in the now cool September air, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the perfectly manicured lawn across the street. Chloe, a divorce lawyer with a no-nonsense demeanor and a deeply compassionate heart, didn't offer platitudes. She sat beside Olivia, put an arm around her, and just let the silence be. "He told me," Olivia finally said, her voice raspy, "the whole thing. He's gay, Chloe. He's known since he was a teenager." Chloe squeezed her shoulder. "Oh, Liv, I'm so sorry." "Sorry for what?" Olivia asked, a bitter laugh escaping her. "That my husband doesn't want me? Or that he never did? Which part is the sorriest? I can't decide. It's all just one big pile of sorry." "I'm sorry for the lie," Chloe said, her voice firm. "I'm sorry for the years he stole from you and from himself. I'm sorry for the pain you're in. That's it. His identity is his business. His deception is what hurt you." The clarity of Chloe's words cut through some of the fog. "He cried," Olivia remembered, her voice distant. "He said he loved me. I think he actually believes it." "It's possible," Chloe conceded. "People can love in all sorts of fractured ways. He probably loves you as his best friend, his family, the anchor of his life. But it wasn't the love you signed up for. It wasn't the whole truth. And a half-truth is a whole lie." Chloe stayed the weekend. She made Olivia eat. She dragged her out for a walk, forcing her to feel the crisp autumn air in her lungs. And she left her with the number of a therapist. "Dr. Evelyn Reed," she said, pressing the card into Olivia's hand. "She's not one of those save the marriage at all costs types. She's a save the person type. And right now, you're the person who needs saving." Olivia resisted for 2 weeks. The idea of dissecting her humiliation with a stranger felt unbearable, but the nights were the worst. Sleep offered no escape, only delivering nightmares in which she was wandering through the endless, empty corridors of her own house, calling Michael's name. Finally, she made the call. Dr. Reed's office was not what she expected. It was a calm, minimalist space with comfortable chairs and a large window overlooking a quiet garden. Dr. Reed herself was a woman in her late 50s, with kind eyes and a presence that was both grounding and unintrusive. In that first session, Olivia just talked. The story poured out of her, a torrent of grief, rage, and bewilderment. She spoke of her shattered pride, of her feelings of profound stupidity for not having seen it, of the way her own body now felt alien to her, as if it were a testament to her undesirability. "You feel that his identity is a reflection on you," Dr. Reed observed gently when Olivia finally paused, breathless. "Isn't it?" Olivia shot back. "I was the woman he couldn't desire. For 15 years, I lived in a marriage that was a performance. What does that make me?" "It makes you the other victim of his fear," Dr. Reed said, her voice even. "He built a cage to hide in, but he locked you in it with him. His actions were about his own terror, his own internalized shame. It's a profound betrayal, Olivia, but it is not a judgment on your worth, your beauty, or your desirability. It's a map of his own private war." Over the next few weeks, Olivia began to see the faint outlines of that map. Dr. Reed helped her separate the man from the lie. The man, Michael, was someone she had loved and in many ways still did. He was gentle and funny and had supported her dreams. He had been her best friend. The lie, however, was a monstrous, living thing that had consumed their life. Her anger, she began to realize, was for the lie. Her grief was for the man and for the life she thought they had. Meanwhile, Michael was adrift in his own personal hell. The motel room was a purgatory of beige walls and the smell of industrial cleaner. He told the school he was taking a leave of absence for family reasons. The lie was reflexive, a habit he couldn't seem to break. He had met Ethan for coffee once since that night. The encounter was excruciating. Ethan was kind, but Michael was a wreck, consumed by a guilt so profound it made him physically ill. "You have to tell her the whole truth, Michael," Ethan had said, his voice gentle but firm. "Not just the part that got discovered, all of it, the why." Michael knew he was right. He also knew it was the most terrifying thing he would ever have to do. He called Dr. Reed, having gotten her number from Olivia through a clipped, logistical text message. His own sessions were a painful excavation of a lifetime of self-loathing, of a childhood spent in a rigidly conservative home where the word gay was a whispered sin, of a desperate teenage prayer to be made normal. He had met Olivia in college, and she was everything good and bright and stable. He'd clung to her like a drowning man to a raft, convincing himself that his deep, platonic love for her was enough. For a long time, it had been, or so he had told himself. After a month of living in separate, silent worlds, Olivia agreed to meet, not for reconciliation, but for what she called a final debriefing. She needed to understand the why. She needed to hear it from him, without the filter of her own pain. She chose the setting, their living room, the heart of the home, the primary stage for their life together. When he walked in, he looked 10 years older. He was gaunt, his eyes shadowed with sleeplessness. The sight of him caused a pang in Olivia's chest, a phantom limb of a feeling, the ghost of her old love. They sat in their respective armchairs, a chasm of Persian rug between them. For a long time, neither spoke. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, marking the seconds of their ruined life. Finally, Michael began to speak. His voice was low, broken. He didn't make excuses. He just told his story. He told her about being a boy who loved books more than sports, who felt like an alien in his own skin. He told her about the crushing fear, the prayers, the desperate attempts to be the man everyone expected him to be. "When I met you," he said, his eyes fixed on his hands, "it was like the sun came out. You were so strong, so sure of yourself, so good. I loved you instantly. I do love you, Liv, but I was a coward. I saw a life with you as a safe harbor, a place where I could be a good man, a good husband, and maybe that would be enough. I thought I could outrun that other part of myself." He talked about the years of quiet suppression, the small acts of self-denial that accumulated into a mountain of deceit. He talked about how his love for her became intertwined with his guilt, each feeding the other. "Meeting Ethan didn't start this," he said, finally looking at her. His eyes were swimming with unshed tears. "It just held up a mirror. He was living a life of truth, and it made me see my own lie for what it was. Writing those letters, it was like I was lancing a wound that's been festering for 30 years. I never meant for you to see them. I never meant to hurt you. You are the best person I have ever known, and I have caused you a pain that I will never be able to forgive myself for." Olivia listened. She listened past the words, to the raw, unvarnished agony beneath them. Her own anger, which had been a roaring fire for weeks, began to cool, leaving behind the aching embers of a vast shared sorrow. She wasn't looking at a monster. She was looking at a man who had been so terrified of himself that he had broken both their lives in his attempt to feel safe. She saw the boy he must have been, scared and alone. She saw the young man who had clung to her, hoping her light could chase away his shadows. And she saw the man before her now, stripped of all his defenses, utterly broken. In that moment, something shifted in the room. The roles of betrayer and betrayed blurred. They were just two people, trapped in the wreckage of a life that had been built on an impossible premise. "You weren't just hiding from the world, Michael," she said, her voice soft but clear, the insight landing with the weight of a revelation. You were hiding from yourself, and you used me as the foundation for your hiding place." He nodded, a ragged sob escaping him. Yes. It was the first completely honest word that had passed between them in 15 years. The climax of their marriage was not a scream, but a whisper of truth in a quiet room. It was devastating, and in a strange, terrifying way, it was a beginning. The decision to separate was mutual and strangely peaceful, made in the exhausted aftermath of that final, honest conversation. It wasn't a parting of anger, but a recognition of necessity. They needed space to breathe air that wasn't thick with the ghosts of their shared past. Michael found a small, sparsely furnished apartment in a town a few miles away, a neutral ground where he could begin the terrifying process of building a life from scratch. Olivia remained in the house, but its familiar comfort was gone. It now felt cavernous, each empty room an echo of the life that wasn't. The first few weeks of true solitude were brutal. The quiet was a physical presence, pressing in on her. She would wake in the middle of the night, reaching for Michael's side of the bed, the muscle memory of 15 years, a cruel trick of the nervous system. She threw herself into her work with a ferocious intensity. Structure, precision, the clean lines of a blueprint, these were things she could control. She took on a challenging project, a modern, minimalist condo development that was the architectural opposite of her own ornate, history-laden home. The work was a salve, but she knew it was also a form of avoidance. Dr. Reed's office became her true sanctuary. It was there that she did the painstaking work of dismantling her own identity. For so long, she had been Olivia and Michael, a single, fused entity. Now she had to discover who Olivia was. "You're grieving," Dr. Reed told her during one session, when Olivia was describing the profound, anchorless feeling that had settled over her. "You're not just grieving the end of a marriage, you're grieving the life you thought you had. You're grieving the future you planned. You must allow yourself to mourn that loss as you would a death." And so she mourned. The grief came in waves, unpredictable and powerful. Sometimes it was a sharp, stabbing anger at Michael for his cowardice. Sometimes it was a deep, aching pity for the man who had lived in such fear. And sometimes, most painfully, it was a sorrow for herself, for the woman who had invested her whole heart in a beautiful, hollow structure. She started walking. Every evening, as the autumn leaves turned from gold to rust and began to fall, she would walk through the quiet streets of Maple Creek. She watched other families through their brightly lit windows, couples cooking dinner, parents reading to their children. It was like looking at a life that was now in another language. But slowly, with each step, the world began to come back into focus. She noticed the intricate patterns of frost on a window pane, the stoic beauty of a bare oak tree against a winter gray sky. Her architect's eye, once focused only on the grand design, began to appreciate the small, resilient details. She and Michael communicated sporadically, mostly through text messages about practicalities, mail, bills, the logistics of their disentangling lives. But occasionally, a different kind of message would appear. "Saw the first snow today," he texted one morning in late November. "Made me think of that time we got snowed in and watched old movies for 2 days." Olivia's first instinct was a flare of anger. How dare he be nostalgic for a memory that was a lie? But she paused. She remembered that weekend. It had been real for her, and in his own fractured way, it had probably been real for him too, a moment of genuine companionship and warmth. "I remember," she typed back. "I still have that old Cary Grant box set." It was a tiny bridge, fragile and tentative, across the chasm that separated them. As winter deepened, blanketing Illinois in a thick, insulating layer of snow, Olivia made a decision. The house had to go. It was an exquisite museum of a life she no longer lived. To truly move forward, she needed to build a new space, one that belonged only to her. Selling the house was a process of careful, painful archaeology. Each box she packed was a layer of her past. She found old love letters from their courtship, filled with a youthful sincerity that now felt tragic. She packed away the photographs, the shared books, the artifacts of their marriage. Chloe came to help, her pragmatic presence a steadying force. She didn't rush Olivia or dismiss her tears. She just handed her another roll of packing tape and kept the coffee pot full. Michael, meanwhile, was on his own harrowing journey. Coming out at 40 in a small, conservative-leaning town was not a gentle process. He told his principal first, his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold his coffee cup. He then told a few close colleagues, including Ethan. Their support was a lifeline. But there was also the whispered gossip in the faculty lounge, the parents who looked at him differently, the quiet but unmistakable chill from some corners of the community. He and Ethan began to spend more time together, their relationship evolving slowly, cautiously. It was not a grand romance, but something quieter, more tentative. It was built on the shared ground of understanding, but shadowed by the complicated wreckage of Michael's past. Ethan was patient, understanding that Michael was not just starting a new relationship, but learning how to exist as a new person. The most difficult conversation Michael had was with his parents. The phone call was a disaster of stilted phrases, long, pained silences, and his mother's eventual, tearful question, "What will people think?" It was the same fear that had governed Michael's entire life. But this time, something was different. "I don't know what they'll think," Michael had replied, his voice shaking but firm. "But for the first time, I'm trying not to care. I'm just trying to be honest." He was learning a new language, the language of truth Ethan had spoken of. It was clumsy and difficult, but it was his. Spring arrived late that year, a hesitant thaw that slowly loosened winter's grip. The first crocuses pushed their way through the cold, damp earth in Maple Creek, their purple and yellow heads a small, defiant promise of renewal. Olivia had moved into a sleek, modern apartment in a new development in a neighboring town. She had designed the interior herself. It was all clean lines, open spaces, and large windows that flooded the rooms with light. There were no ghosts here. The furniture was new, chosen by her and for her. On her wall was not a collection of family photos, but a large, abstract painting, a swirl of tumultuous blues and grays giving way to a streak of brilliant, hopeful gold. The divorce papers had been signed a month earlier. It was an anticlimactic event, handled by lawyers, a legal formality that felt strangely disconnected from the emotional cataclysm it represented. There was no bitterness, no fighting over assets. They split everything down the middle, two business partners dissolving a long-held company. She was lonelier, sometimes, but she was not alone. She had dinner with Chloe once a week. She had reconnected with old friends. She was taking a pottery class, finding a messy, tactile joy in creating something with her hands that didn't require a blueprint. She was rediscovering the contours of her own soul. She was learning to be happy in a quiet, self-sufficient way she had never known before. One Saturday morning in May, her phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "I know this is a lot to ask," it read, "but would you be willing to meet for coffee? There's a place in Evanston, halfway between us. I'd like to see how you are." Olivia stared at the message for a long time. A year ago, the thought would have been impossible. 6 months ago, it would have been painful. Now, it just felt possible. "Okay," she replied. They met at a bustling coffee shop with large windows and the rich smell of roasted beans. When Michael walked in, Olivia was struck by how different he looked. The haunted, gaunt look was gone. He was still thin, but he held himself differently, with a new, quiet confidence. There were still lines of sorrow around his eyes, but they were no longer the defining feature of his face. They were just part of his story. "Hi," he said, sliding into the chair opposite her. "Hi, Michael," she smiled. It was a genuine smile, free of artifice. The conversation was stilted at first, a navigation of unfamiliar waters. They talked about her new apartment, his work, the weather. It was the careful, polite talk of acquaintances. But as the coffee cooled, the walls began to come down. "You look good, Liv," he said, his voice sincere, peaceful. "I am," she said, and was surprised to find it was the absolute truth. "It's been a long year, but I'm okay, more than okay." She looked at him, a genuine curiosity in her eyes. "And you?" He took a deep breath. "I'm getting there," he said. "Ethan and I are together. It's not a fairy tale. There's a lot to work through, a lot of baggage that's my own, but it's honest. And for the first time in my life, I don't feel like I'm suffocating." He paused, then looked directly at her. "I think about you all the time. I hope you know that. I think about the pain I caused, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to atone for it." "You don't have to atone, Michael," Olivia said softly. "You just have to live honestly. That's all. For yourself." She took a sip of her coffee, gathering her thoughts. "For a long time, I hated you. I think I needed to. But I don't anymore. I see the whole picture now. I see the scared boy you were. I see the man who was trapped. I'm not condoning the lie. It almost destroyed me. But I understand the fear that built it." A single tear traced a path down Michael's cheek, but he wasn't trying to hide it. It wasn't a tear of self-pity, but of gratitude. "Your house sold," he said, changing the subject, but it was all part of the same conversation. "I saw the listing online." "Yes," Olivia said. "It was time. It was a beautiful house, but it was for a different life, a different person." She looked out the window at the people passing by on the street, each living their own complex, hidden story. "I'm building a new life now, on a new foundation." They sat in silence for a moment, but it wasn't the hollow, aching silence of their last months together. It was a comfortable silence, filled with everything that had been said and everything that was now understood. They were no longer husband and wife. They were two survivors of a shared shipwreck who had washed up on different shores and had learned to build new shelters. When they parted on the sidewalk, there was a moment of awkwardness. A hug felt like too much, a handshake too little. So Olivia simply reached out and placed her hand on his arm, a gesture of friendship, of forgiveness, of closure. "Be happy, Michael," she said. "You too, Liv," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "You deserve it more than anyone." Olivia walked back to her car, feeling a lightness she hadn't thought possible. The grief was no longer a weight she carried, but a part of her landscape, like a weathered stone in a garden she had learned to cultivate. She had lost the life she had planned, the blueprint she had followed so faithfully. But in its place, she had found something else, something she had never thought to design, herself, strong, resilient, and finally, breathtakingly free.